Hello, my best viewers. This is your Elizabeth. Thank you for your support. Enjoy watching.
Soft clouds surround the seagulls as they frolic over the calm sea, enjoying the good weather. The sea was amazing at how beautiful it was, as if strewn with precious stones. And this place was not easy, because a tribe calling itself Mamak had long lived in this sea. And the inhabitants of this tribe were magnificent mermaids who attracted attention with their appearance, especially their eyes. But they did not like the human race and constantly attempted to rob them. Since the mermaids possessed magic, they considered themselves the rulers of the sea and did not allow people who were deprived of magic to approach it. Because of this enmity, Emperor Bebenbark of the Empire declared war on the Mamaku tribe. After the end of a long war, a truce was concluded, and one girl was sent from Mamak to the Empire as a guarantor of the agreement. The action itself takes place on the 19th of July, 768, according to the Imperial calendar, in the central annex of the Imperial Palace. 3 girls in matching maid dresses were discussing the flowers, wondering if there were enough of them. One of the girls asked if the other girls were still making pansy wreaths, and then the other girl replied that 10 years had already passed since she left home, so she had long ago realized that she had to follow the rules. However, the girls did not have time to finish the dialogue because they were told to hurry up because the sun should set soon. The maids were reminded of this by the girl Melina Ludovica von Hanover, who was a court maid and who came up to warn the others that they needed to keep an eye on the time. Then the heroines asked the court maid to choose the color of pansies, which would be ideal for Mrs. Cordelia. Miss Melina began to say that if the girls wanted to prepare for tomorrow's birthday celebration in this way, then they needed to hurry up. But she did not have time to finish her thought because she stumbled and lost her balance. Because of this, the maid began to fall, which greatly frightened the other girls. It happened so abruptly that everyone simply froze in place, only shouting in surprise. And then an unknown girl appeared behind the maids, who had not been nearby before. While falling, Melina closed her eyes, so she didn't know where exactly she fell, but it felt like she was in water. To understand what was happening, the court maid had to open her eyes to look around. And then Miss Melina noticed that she was surrounded by the sea, and a girl with gills, looking like a mermaid, was swimming nearby. It was clear that the stranger was reaching out to the court maid and turning all her attention to the miss. When the mermaid realized that she had been seen, she smiled radiantly, and then told Melina to be careful. After that, the unknown girl grabbed the maid tightly by the hand. In the end, both girls were able to emerge from the sea, and everything was fine with them, so there were no troubles. The maids immediately rushed to Miss, asking her if she was okay, because they were still scared for her life. Following Melina, her savior emerged and accomplished her goal very easily, which was even surprising, since it's not so easy to save a drowning person. And this girl really had gills in front of her ears, which looked quite unusual, because it showed that she was not just a person. The mermaid Cordelia, who was a girl from the Mamak tribe, smiled again, noting that she was in time to save the court maid. After this, the girl was once again convinced that Miss Melina was not injured and was in perfect order, which was indeed the case, because she was rescued very quickly. Then the maid said that she was definitely fine, and then thanked Cordelia for saving her. One of the maids noted how good it was that Mistress Cordelia was nearby, because it is unknown what would have happened if she had not been there. The other heroines, meanwhile, admired how amazing this rescue was, because the girl from the Mamak tribe was exactly like a duck to water. And then it turned out that Cordelia is not a purebred mermaid, but a half-breed. The girl was born from the union of a human and Mamak, and as a sign of truce was sent to the Empire to stop the war between the two races. In other words, her very existence is a symbol of peace. One maid admitted that she thought mixed blood was something strange because she did not even know about the existence of mixed races until she met Mistress Cordelia. And then Miss Melina could not stand it and told the ladies to refrain from being rude to Mrs. Cordelia because their words were not tactful. The girls came to their senses and began to apologize, but the half-breed replied that it was all nothing, so it was nothing to worry about. Then the maid noted that the girl was too kind to allow this, to which the mermaid replied that it was all because they had known each other for a long time. And besides, Cordelia believed that it was not in her style to behave formally, so she calmly reacts to such liberties. After this, the girl admitted that she doesn't even remember what it's like to live in water, so the current situation suits her quite well. And then the half-breed added that this was all because Melina was next to her. With these words, Cordelia embarrassed the miss, because she did not expect such an answer at all. But the others thought the mermaid was cute, so all the girls rushed to hug her. Laughing, the heroine began to think that, oddly enough, she did not feel like a hostage in this place. Because of these thoughts, Cordelia began to remember her entire life, thinking about what had already happened. The half-breed had a beautiful ring on her hand, which contained a stone of a delicate pastel color. The only thing the girl remembered was the apology of the mermaid, who had put such a big burden on the child. That day, that unfamiliar mermaid told the girl to remember that people by nature are very greedy and cruel, so none of them can be trusted. The woman also explained to the child what to do if suddenly people force her to use her magic. However, the girl did not remember what exactly this advice was, because the whole memory was very vague. But the heroine definitely remembered that it was this mermaid who gave her the ring that she still wears. So Cordelia remembered that she was given a ring, but she could not remember what she was asked for at that time. It was so long ago that there was nothing left in memory except a gift, which the girl still carefully keeps. But she still doesn't know who this mermaid was to her. The palace was covered with a night blanket covered in bright stars, enticing everyone to go to sleep. The time was already late, however. The light in the room continued to burn, which means someone was still awake. And the girls who were not sleeping were discussing that tomorrow, Mrs. Cordelia would become quite an adult. The mermaid was surrounded by maids who asked her what kind of cake she would like to eat, wondering that it must be caramel milk with nuts, because tomorrow will be a special day. And then the girl exclaimed enthusiastically that very soon she would be 18 years old, and it was clear how much she was looking forward to this moment. But she still told the others that they were attaching too much importance. But this question only made the girls talk about the fact that Cordelia had become quite an adult. So this should definitely be celebrated, because it seems like just yesterday the half-breed was a little girl. The heroine was asked what she would like to receive for her birthday, and she replied that the girls had already done too much for her. The mermaid explained that it was a gift for her that she was living a prosperous life as a simple guarantor, and that such a luxurious mansion was built right in the middle of the Imperial palace. So the lady decided that she had no right to ask for more, because she liked the way she lived. These words touched the others, because they were very pleased that the girl said such words. And then the heroine's conversations were interrupted by Miss, who reminded them that it was too late, and Mrs. Cordelia needed to rest. And then everyone began to worry, because they had completely forgotten about time, having stopped keeping track of it. After that, everyone wished the mermaid good night and sweet dreams and began to leave, giving the heroine a rest. The girl politely said goodbye to everyone with a smile, remaining in the room alone with herself and her thoughts. The lady continued to remember her past, thinking that when she first came to this place, everything seemed so unfamiliar. Then the heroine found herself among strangers, in a place where everything was also unusual and incomprehensible for her. However, despite her fears, all people were kind to her, so thanks to them, she quickly adapted during these 10 years. Lying in bed, the mermaid thought that she was coping quite well with such a life, because not everyone could get used to such changes. And then the girl's thoughts were interrupted by some sounds coming from the street. So the heroine jumped up from her seat, wondering whether it was the sound of the wind or something else. To find out the truth, Cordelia had to get out of bed and go to the window to see everything with her own eyes. The girl had already begun to stretch out her hand to hang the curtains and look out the window. However, she did not have time to do this, because a young man flew out of the window at her and shouted that the girl was clearly not waiting for him. It was Tobias Oleg von Bebenbark, who was the Emperor of Bebenbark, and he came to congratulate the girl first. Cordelia was very surprised to see His Majesty the Emperor, because she did not understand how he ended up here. The girl began to worry that the maids might have noticed the Emperor, but the man replied that everyone here already knows that the Emperor treats the hostage as his own daughter. and wishing your daughter a happy birthday cannot be considered a crime, so everything is fine." Then the half-breed replied that the Emperor's sincere words made her incredibly happy. After this, His Majesty apologized because the girl must be tired of being locked up in this palace, but all this is for her own safety. Of course, for Cordelia, the castle had all the conditions for life, and she never lacked for anything. However, she was still a hostage in this place, as if in a cage, because she was not allowed to go anywhere. His Majesty is truly a merciful man, but due to the possible threat, he was forced to limit visits to the mansion and isolate it from the rest of the territory. And even the workers living here were not allowed to go outside. But the heroine reassured the young man, saying that he was completely fine, even though her life was spent locked up. But in this place, there are people who accept her, despite the fact that she has the blood of the Mamak tribe flowing in her. So she understands that the Emperor simply had no other choice, because if this is her role, then she will do everything to play it in the best possible way. Then His Majesty noted that the girl was very sweet, and then asked what she would like to receive as a gift, to which the heroine replied that she considered anything received from him to be a gift. The Emperor foresaw this answer from Cordelia, so he prepared the gift in advance. His Majesty noted that the girl would definitely like this gift, and then opened the red box that he brought with him. He began to take out a gift from the box, while the heroine waited with bated breath to see what it would be. And finally, the young man showed a gift, which was a dagger that was created especially for the heroine. The blade has such a sharp blade that it can pierce anything. Cordelia was surprised, because this was the first time she had received such a gift, and no one had given her anything like this before. Meanwhile, the clock beat its rhythm, and it was clear that a little more, and the girl's birthday would come. The Emperor said that he was very happy, because the heroine liked his gift. After his words, the clock struck exactly 12, which means that Cordelia turned 18 years old. Then Tobias turned to the girl, and then asked her if she knew how long he had been waiting for this moment. And then something happened that the half-breed could not have expected, because His Majesty stabbed her with a dagger, which he had previously called a gift for the girl. The Emperor not only stabbed the girl, but also cut out her heart, which he was currently holding in his hands. The young man was happy, saying that he was finally able to get what he had wanted for so long. Cordelia could not believe that His Majesty killed her, even though it seemed to her that everyone was treating her well. The girl remembered the moment when she ran to the Emperor when she was little. Then Tobias stretched out his hands to her, and she was happy, playing with him. His Majesty also smiled then, calling the heroine his dear Cordelia. Therefore, the half-breed could not understand why His Majesty did this to her, because he had always been so kind. And then a memory again appeared before the girl's eyes, where an unknown mermaid says something to her and gives her a ring. At that moment, the heroine noticed that the stone on the ring began to glow, attracting attention. She remembered that the mermaid had said that people would try with all their might to hurt her. And people will do this because Cordelia is the pearl of this ring, which the stranger gave. Then the heroine remembered how she looked at this ring, realizing that people would want to break this pearl, but she would not allow it. The girl was still conscious, however. It was not for long, because everything began to blur before her eyes. And then the heroine realized that if she wants to have time to do something, then she needs to do it quickly, because she has almost no time left. Cordelia realized that if she wanted to survive, she needed to do something about the ring that could save her. And then the girl grabbed the ring with her second hand, making it glow even brighter. The half-breed's eyes closed, but then she was able to open them again, seeing the light in front of her. At that moment, the heroine jumped out of the bed in which she found herself in an unknown way. It was then that the girl realized that at the moment, everything was fine with her, and nothing threatened her life, but only for now. The only proof that this was not a dream was that her ring changed a lot after that. Cordelia stood frozen in place, looking at what had become of her ring. And then Miss Melina ran into the half-breed, asking the girl if she was okay. At that moment, the mistress pounced on the girl who had run in and asked whether she was alive, because the heroine still felt how the blade had been stabbed into her. Then the miss reassured the mermaid by saying that she had simply had a nightmare, because this often happens before important events. The girl asked if it was really just a nightmare, because everything looked and felt like what really happened. Melina said that, of course, this is a nightmare, because today Mrs. Cordelia turns 16 years old. This surprised the girl very much, because she knew that it was now the 768th year of the Imperial calendar, and today she turns 18. The court maid noted that the heroine, most likely, has not yet fully awakened, because until the year 768, she needs to wait 2 more years, according to her. Cordelia couldn't believe her ears, because just recently she was preparing to celebrate her 18th birthday. Therefore, the mermaid rushed off in an unknown direction, which greatly shocked the miss, who did not expect this. The heroine hoped that Melina was just joking, because just yesterday she was so diligently preparing for her coming of age. The girl remembered that for her 16th birthday, she asked for a chocolate cake. And that day, the maid promised that she would definitely tell the cook about it. While running, Cordelia came across the maids, who were waiting for her with chocolate cake, just as she had wanted 2 years ago. Then the lady began to realize that all this could not be just one big joke, because there were too many coincidences. In addition, on the chocolate cake itself, it was written that the girl was turning 16. Cordelia became convinced that she really went back 2 years ago, and nothing could be done about it. Meanwhile, life was also in full swing in the Imperial Palace, and various events were taking place. Some child was seriously injured and injured his knee, but help was immediately rushed to him. While the boy was being treated, the others waited patiently for the magic to work. Finally, Tobias Oleg von Bebenbark, who was the prince of the Bebenbark Empire, said that he was finished, and now the child would definitely not be hurt. And then the man and woman who were standing next to each other began to say that every time they were surprised by the healing magic of the Imperial family, because this was one of the greatest treasures of the Empire. After they praised Tobias, they started shouting at the boy, because if he had been careful, nothing would have happened. The prince began to protect the child, asking the others not to be so strict with him. The young man said that anything can happen in life, and healing magic was originally given by God to help people. In addition, Tobias was happy that he was able to help a child who was seriously hurt. But the others continued to say that the boy got hurt because of his own stupidity, so he could continue to hurt himself and stop taking care of his body, since he got away with it so easily. Then the boy explained that he found himself in such a situation because he was trying to get to the place that everyone said that a mermaid lived there. But even if this is so, this does not mean that the child is allowed to go there. And then the man asked His Highness if he really would continue to hide the hostage from others. No one in the Imperial Palace had ever seen the hostage, so it was not difficult to understand the reason why a small child was so interested in her. After this, the boy asked the prince if he had seen the little mermaid that everyone was talking about. Tobias didn't know how to respond, so he started talking to himself, thinking of an answer. Without coming up with anything, the young man said that he forgot to do something, thus trying to avoid answering. Then the young man apologized to everyone, said that he would see them later, and then quickly took off. Such an unexpected departure of the prince surprised everyone who was present. The mermaid, meanwhile, still did not understand what had happened, and therefore continued to look at her ring. The girl made the assumption that it was precisely because of the ring that she received as a child that she was able to return to the past. And this happened precisely at that moment when the emperor broke the precious stone with a knife. The other girls noticed the mistress's excitement and the fact that she had an unhealthy complexion, so they asked how the heroine was feeling. Cordelia replied that it was okay, because she couldn't tell them what was worrying her at the moment. And then the girl looked out the window, where the sun was shining brightly and the weather was good. Somehow, this view took all the heroine's attention, as if she remembered something. Then the mermaid decided that she had to believe something, and quickly hurried somewhere. The girl thought that if she really returned to the past, then someone should definitely come to the central annex. Meanwhile, the prince was clearly not feeling his best as he lay on the grass. And what worried the young man was why they asked him something about the mermaid. Did they really notice something that they shouldn't have seen? After that, Tobias raised his head and saw a girl in front of him, looking at him in surprise. The girl then knew that if she really found herself in the past, she would meet him. Seeing Cordelia, the young man smiled at her as if he had not experienced any worries before. It turned out that His Majesty was lying on the grass because he got stuck in the fence while climbing over it. As a child, the maids often whispered about the prince, saying that he was different from everyone else because he liked girly things like dolls and ribbons. And once he even suddenly burst into tears during a sword fight. Because of this, everyone believed that he would definitely not be able to become a worthy emperor because he did not live up to expectations. Of course, the boy heard all these conversations and did not understand why everyone was saying that he was strange. Because if he likes cute teddy bears, does that mean that he is very different from other people? The child said that he liked floral fabrics the most, so he asked to have a robe made from them. And even such a trifle made the maids worry, because they thought that fabric with such a design was usually worn by girls, and the successor of the emperor himself should wear a strict red satin suit. And the boy didn't understand why they didn't make him a robe from the fabric he liked. And then the girls began to cheat, saying that they could sew a small scarf from this fabric, so they needed to take measurements. But the maids deceived the child, and in the end he had to wear a strict red suit as required, so it was a pity that no one tried to deal with what he was feeling. And then the prince met Cordelia, who turned out to be the only person who could understand him. In the end, Tobias was able to get out from under the fence, so he thanked those who helped him, because he could not even imagine what he would have done if he had not met his saviors. And then the mist said that if the prince had simply entered from the main entrance, then such a problem would not have happened. Tobias explained everything by saying that he had such a busy day that he himself did not understand how he ended up there. And since it was Cordelia's birthday, the young man spent the whole night trying to make cookies, so he invited the girls to treat themselves. And then they praised the prince, because his laziness skill is getting better every day. Meanwhile, the mermaid was thinking that everything was happening exactly as it was when she was 16. After all, His Majesty got stuck in that hole in the fence last time, and then he had to be helped out. And that time, Tobias also treated everyone to cookies. But these were not the moments that the heroine wanted to check. At that moment, His Majesty said that he had prepared a gift for Cordelia, so he asked her to accept it. The prince admitted that he did not know what to give, so he himself made a special gift for the girl. Then the mermaid thanked Tobias and accepted his gift, probably already knowing what was there. After this, Cordelia asked what was happening outside, because she knew nothing and was wondering how His Majesty was doing. It was clear that this question took the prince by surprise, and he did not know at all what to answer. Tobias realized that he wouldn't be able to escape this time, so he honestly admitted that he didn't know whether to tell one piece of news or not. His uncertainty made the court maid worry, because if the prince did not want to talk, then the news was clearly not pleasant. His Majesty apologized for delivering this news on such a holiday, but it turned out that the war against the Mamaks had begun again. Of course, this news shocked everyone, because no one expected this while they had a mermaid living as proof of peace. Then Cordelia realized that everything was really the same as last time. Around the same time, in the summer of 766, another war broke out, which occurred due to the fact that the Mamaki invaded the human world of their own free will. The prince explained that the Mamaki were the first to break the treaty and plunder a seaside village near the islands. During this incident, there were many victims, even old people and children, and Tobias did not understand that such a thing could happen because people did nothing wrong. And this means that it's not people who are to blame for everything, but mermaids, who, as it turns out, are very tough. And then the prince came to his senses because he spoke badly about the people of mermaids to Cordelia, so he hastened to apologize to the girl. But the heroine reassured the young man that she still doesn't remember her home well, because almost her entire conscious life was spent here and not among the Mamaki tribe. So Cordelia was not very affected by the words about the tribe, about which she knows practically nothing and does not remember, because her home became a completely different place. And then the heroes heard screams that His Highness the Emperor was approaching them, which took everyone by surprise. Then the mermaid began to push the prince away so that he would hide as quickly as possible. Only the heroine managed to hide the guy when the emperor began to approach them. His Majesty walked with a calm smile, not giving the appearance that a terrible incident had recently happened in the Empire. The girls immediately greeted the Emperor with all honors as expected. His Highness asked how the heroines were in the mood, and then added that since it was Cordelia's birthday, he came to personally congratulate her. The Emperor noted that he was very glad that every year the mermaid became more and more beautiful and mature. But the girl already knew His Majesty's true desires, so this time he would not be able to bribe her with his insincere kindness. The fact that the Second War began only means that the peace treaty with the Mamak tribe was destroyed, so it is strange that after that the man kept her in the castle for another 2 years. The Emperor asked if there was anything that Cordelia would like to receive as a gift, to which she replied, as usual, that it was a gift for her that His Majesty was so kind to her. Then the young man asked the heroine to stop talking like that, while he himself stroked her on the head. This gesture once again reminded the mermaid of how the Emperor treated her on her 18th birthday. And then the girl said that she had just thought, and, it seems, remembered one thing that she would like to receive as a gift. This interested the man, because the mermaid had never asked him for anything, so he asked her to quickly say what she wanted. And then Cordelia said that if His Majesty allowed, she really wanted to go outside, beyond the boundaries of this mansion. To which the Emperor replied that he had already said many times that it was very dangerous for a mermaid outside, so you shouldn't forget about it. But the girl continued to insist that she had been in this house for so long that she no longer thought that she could stay locked up for another year. Then the Emperor replied that the heroine was still too young, but when she became old enough, then the man would let her out. So the girl realized that this would never happen, because His Majesty was not going to let her out from the very beginning, because as soon as she became an adult, the man stuck a knife in her. And so Cordelia's tears began to flow as she asked the Emperor if she really should be locked up until she came of age. And then the mermaid began to get really hysterical and started screaming that she was so tired and that she would rather die than continue to sit here and do nothing. But all this was feigned, because the heroine understood that this was the only way to convince His Highness to do as she wanted. Cordelia knew that if this worked, she could change her future, so now there was no choice but to test it and take a chance. The heroine continued to cry bitterly, pretending that she felt very bad because she could not go outside. Of course, His Majesty the Emperor did not expect such behavior from the mermaid, who never asked for anything and behaved quietly and submissively. This behavior of the heroine was not part of the plans of the Emperor, who thought that she, as usual, would be grateful for the kind attitude towards her and would not ask for anything more. The girl, meanwhile, waited for a reaction from His Majesty, continuing to hope that he would give her what she wanted. And then the Emperor said that it seemed that Cordelia was very lonely. These were clearly not the words the mermaid expected to hear after her performance. The man apologized for the fact that during this time, he never understood what the heroine was hiding in her heart, and no matter how much he wanted to fulfill her desire, but now he cannot afford it. And then His Highness informed the mermaid that, unfortunately, the war against the Mamaks had begun again. Therefore, because of the war, there will be people outside who hate the girl and will reproach her for being a half-breed. Because of this, the man cannot let the young mistress go to people because it is too risky. Then the heroine admitted that she continues to live in ignorance, not knowing anything that is happening outside, and this upsets her. His Majesty asked the mermaid to try to understand him and his thoughts. All this time, the Emperor held Cordelia's hand, supposedly trying to cheer up the heroine. His Majesty gave the mermaid a promise that he would try to end the war as soon as possible, and until then, she would have to be patient and wait. After this whole situation, the two maids walked towards the tall bushes, as if trying to find something or someone. Looking into the plants, the girls began to talk about how they could go out now, since the Emperor had just left the mansion. And then a guy crawled out of the bushes, whom the mermaid had hidden there so that he would not catch the eye of His Majesty. After that, the young man looked at Cordelia and Melina, who were standing at a distance from him. The young man looked at the girl with regret, because he understood how painful she was from the recent news. But this news made not only the mermaid worry, but also people who whispered that the war, in their opinion, had long been in the past. But here was such a turn of events. And then another maid approached the others, who tried to reassure them that there was no need to worry. This maid reminded that the imperial family has grown stronger from generation to generation since ancient times. The Bebbanbark Empire conquered continents as if it were the will of heaven itself. To console the heroes, the girl began to tell the story of Bebbanbark, even though it was quite famous. The story began with the fact that soon after the first emperor took the throne, he fell ill with an incurable disease for a reason unknown to everyone. Many doctors gave him all kinds of medicines, but none of them achieved success. Therefore, the emperor accepted his fate and waited, but later heard the voice of the heavenly lord. The voice said that he would grant this emperor and all his descendants the power that would lead them to a better future. And after that, a real miracle happened, because the first emperor somehow miraculously recovered, as if he had not been sick. Moreover, the emperor himself mastered the magic of healing, although people were not born with magical abilities. Therefore, people stopped considering him a man and decided that he was a real deity. Everyone was surprised that the first emperor had magical ability, so no one questioned his rule. But the story does not end there, because the power granted to the imperial family did not disappear anywhere. Superpower-like power was passed down from generation to generation. The power of the heavenly lord is passed on to the heirs, which is a real blessing. And everyone on the continent heard this story. And His Majesty also became one of the most powerful emperors of all times. One of the maids concluded that the current emperor managed to step over 1,000 people, meaning people 50 years ago. Among the girls, there was one who admitted to the prince that in a world overflowing with magic, when she looks at the face of a young man, she still sees a sweet little boy who has not been touched by this whole war. The young man replied that he would never have thought that someone would ever say something like that to him, and then added that it was all thanks to his dad. As a result, the girls decided that as long as God blesses them, no war will reach them, so they can calm down and trust His Majesty. All this was heard by Cordelia, who did not say a word about this, because she was thinking about something. And the girl was thinking that for a moment, she noticed how the emperor's mood had changed. And then she thought about how a man managed to play a good person so convincingly. Then the heroine began to worry that all the people she knew were also only playing their roles, deceiving her. These thoughts greatly frightened Cordelia, because she had trusted all these people for so many years, living among them. These feelings were noticed by the prince, who asked the mermaid if she had lied to him when she said that she was fine, because he was confused, because he did not know how the girl felt. After this, the young man added that if only he could ask his father to give the heroine more freedom, but he was not sure that he would succeed. But then the young man thought a little more and decided that he could still catch up with his father and try to make him change his mind, hoping that at least His Majesty would listen to him. These words did not agree with the thoughts that all the people who surround the mermaid are deceiving her. After this, the court maid also approached the heroes with the words that she should have immediately understood this, referring to the experiences of the mermaid. Melina took the girl by the hand, saying that all this time she thought that she understood Mrs. Cordelia. After this, the maid asked the heroine for forgiveness for not being able to see what was weighing heavily on her heart. The maids also ran up to the mistress and began to apologize for the fact that she suffered a lot, and then asked the mermaid to share her experiences with them. After that, Cordelia looked at the prince again, thinking about everything she had heard. In front of the mermaid stood a young man who looked at her with tenderness. And then the girl remembered what the prince looked like when they first met. That day, the boy had a beautiful pink scarf tied on his arm. Noticing the fabric, the mermaid told the boy that she really liked this scarf. The guy was very surprised by this, because before he had only been judged for his taste, so he asked if it looked strange. Cordelia was surprised by this question, because she did not understand why it should be strange. And then the boy explained that it was because he was a man, and men did not wear such things. At this, the girl just laughed, because it doesn't matter who he is, the main thing is that he likes it. This amazed the guy, to whom no one had ever said that, and everyone around him only forbade him to wear what he wanted. Therefore, the prince was very glad to meet someone who does not condemn him, but supports him. After that, The boy stood up and began to brush off his clothes because he had recently been on the ground and got dirty. And then he told Cordelia that he was pleased to meet her. The young man added that he should have said that from the very beginning, and then extended his hand to the heroine. In the end, the prince invited the young lady to become friends with him because he liked this girl thanks to the words that she said to him. This is how a strong friendship arose between the mermaid and the prince, which began when they were still children. Cordelia tried to pretend to be brave, but in reality she was very lonely and scared in this unfamiliar place. But fortunately, the girl met a boy who became her first friend and saved her from loneliness, so she immediately agreed to friendship. Day after day, the prince came to play with his new friend. Two children who found each other in this harsh world became close very quickly. One day, the girl hit herself very hard, scratching her knee until it bled. It was then that the little mermaid noticed that the prince was a very vulnerable person. The heroine doesn't know if all people were like this in childhood, but her friend often shed tears in front of her. That time, when the mermaid fell, the boy quickly rushed to help his friend, using his magic. And after that, the girl noticed that her scar had completely disappeared. Not even a trace remained. This made the heroine very happy, so she looked at her friend gratefully. Although the boy often cried, he also smiled many, many times, which could not please the mermaid because he was her first best friend, and she was happy when he was having fun. And then the girl continued to think about whether the person she considered her best friend for many years could be deceiving her. It's not just about their good mood towards the mermaid, because all these people who surround her have truly become her family. Cordelia considered family to everyone who came to her when she found herself in this unfamiliar world. She didn't know what the others thought about this, but she considered them people close to her and did not want to doubt them. And then the mermaid admitted that she did not talk about her feelings because she did not want to disturb the others, and then added that it seems that she felt helpless for so long that in the end, she could not stand it. The prince hurried to tell the girl that she did not need to pretend and lie in front of them, that everything was fine, and he could still try to talk to his father. And then Cordelia said that she was feeling better now, and then asked the prince to promise her that, no matter how much the war grew, he would not hate anyone because of it. The courtmaid responded that the lady was right in some ways, but she was still overcome by doubts about this request. The mermaid said that they just need to wait a little, and time will fly by so quickly that they will not have time to notice anything. Cordelia was grateful to the others for the support they gave her, because she actually felt better after that. If the girl decided not to doubt any of her acquaintances, then she should believe them, even though the mermaid understood that His Majesty was definitely hiding something from her, and it didn't matter what the secret was. But the heroine wanted to find out the truth. Therefore, Cordelia thought that she would need to talk to the Emperor again. The mermaid understood that things were very bad now, because she could not take a single step outside the mansion, and besides, she could do little on her own. The girl decided to restore the chronology of her memories in the hope that it would help her, so she mentally returned to the past. At the beginning of July of the year 766, the Second War broke out. 16-year-old Cordelia was in the middle of the same year. Then, in the same year in August, there was an offensive of the Ma troops. Somehow the Archmage joined the war and became a division commander. In the chaos in the close, Maki arrived in the city of Salts. And in October, Noah prepared the most delicious cake that the heroine had tasted, and her memories end with the fact that in mid-July 768 she turns 18, and the Emperor kills her. It became clear that no matter how much the girl delved into her memories, she never found any useful information. Even information about Noah was not useful. While the mistress was hovering in her thoughts, the maids were in the same room with her, monitoring her behavior. Then one girl asked the other if she thought Cordelia was acting too strange. The maids even began to worry that the mermaid was not feeling well. And while the heroines were discussing the mistress, someone came up to them from behind and called out to them. It was the court maid Melina who asked the maids why they were just standing around and not cleaning. Then the girls explained to the maid that Mrs. Cordelia was behaving very strangely. The mermaid, meanwhile, continued to try to remember something else, thinking that she might have missed something. but all she remembered was that she was covered in blood. Her eyes were clouded, and the Emperor was standing next to him, who cut out her heart and laughed. The girl's reasoning was interrupted by Melina, who approached the heroine and called her. After this, the court maid asked Cordelia what she was thinking about. Then the heroine began to deny that there was nothing special in what she was thinking about. As a result, the girl did not talk about her thoughts, but changed the topic, thanking Millen for bringing tea. But the maid did not let up, asking whether the mistress had become so quiet because the war had started again. Then the mermaid realized that Melina was thinking that the girl was upset because of the war. The heroine understood that it was better to leave everything as it was, because if Cordelia told that His Majesty wanted to kill her, the maid would clearly not believe it. And the fact that the mermaid came from the future will be difficult to explain, because it is really difficult to believe. So Cordelia decided that it would be more natural to pretend that she was afraid of war. And then the mermaid noticed that the court maid had not brought tea for herself, because the heroine expected that they would keep her company. The lady began to talk about how, having heard about the war, she could not help but worry, moreover, being locked up. It is very difficult to receive reliable information about what is happening outside, and this worries her very much. Luckily, by getting the nuggets of information, Melina will be able to get a rough idea of what's really going on there, so Cordelia won't have to live in the dark. The mermaid replied that she would be very grateful to the maid if she did this for the girl. And then Melina noticed something about Cordelia that shocked her, making her even scream. It turned out that the maid's attention was attracted by the mermaid's ring, which had clearly undergone changes. Then the girl began to wriggle out, saying that she had dropped her ring in the room when she was rushing here. And then the stone broke. Melina suggested that the ring could be repaired, because it was the only thing the mermaid brought from her homeland. But Cordelia replied that she didn't think it would be possible to repair it, and that was already a long time ago. The maid began to say that this thing was most likely expensive for the heroine, but she argued, explaining that it was a trifle, and then simply turned Melina's attention to the fact that the sugar had run out. So Melina hurried to bring more sugar, apologizing for not noticing that there was no more sugar. The mermaid then waved to the girl with her hand, which had a broken ring on it. Then the court maid again turned her attention to the ring, thinking about something of her own. And then the story takes us to a man who told his daughter that a woman's duty and happiness lies not only in the birth of a son, because such views are already outdated. After this, the father told the girl that she, too, has the right to be an heir and have the opportunity to make her dreams come true. And if her desire to become a knight is not a passing whim, then she can try to hold a real sword in her hands. Then the girl stretched out her hands to, a little nervously, take her father's sword. The man patted his daughter on the head, and she tightened her grip on such a dear thing to her. In conclusion, the father said that the girl is free to live the way she wants. And then the good weather gives way to bad, with heavy rain and a black, black sky. But people were in no hurry to hide from the rain, standing under it with sad faces and in gloomy clothes. Everyone said that they would never have thought that Prince Leonhar would die so suddenly. And then they began to whisper that the people of Hanover would only triumph when they heard this news, because he wanted to pass everything on to his only daughter. And now that the son has the opportunity to inherit the place of head of the family, the elders will definitely choose a boy and not a girl, as the prince wanted. The children heard all these conversations, and then the boy began to snuggle as close to his sister as possible, trying to hide from prying eyes. Then the girl began to calm her brother Bill, telling him that everything would be fine. But the boy was still worried, realizing that his body was very weak and he was not as smart as his sister, so he did not want to become the head of the family. These words touched the heart of the girl, who looked sadly at Bill. The heroine began to tell the boy that he was not weak, and from now on he would be responsible for their family, so he needed to pull himself together. It was then that the girl realized that nothing was changing at all in the world. When the girl's father left, her dream went with him, so she decided to temporarily take on the role of eldest and help her brother manage the family. After some time, the girl's friend began to swear at Millie because she decided to become a maid in the Imperial palace. Millie explained that it was not her decision, because it was the elders who forced her to do it. If a girl works in the Imperial Palace, she will be able to get married safely, and all this for the sake of her family. This means that Millie will no longer attend fencing classes. And then the heroine said that she is engaged in fencing only thanks to her father, but now he is gone. Unfortunately, in the eyes of the elders, a woman with a sword is ugly, so she will not be able to do what she wants. The girl understands that no one cares about her opinion anymore, because now she is forced to do everything as the elders say. After listening to all this, the boy could barely keep himself from crying, because he saw how difficult his girlfriend's situation was. Millie noticed that her friend was sad, and he explained this by saying that even the teacher praises the heroine because she is very talented. Besides, when the girl becomes a maid, the boys will no longer be able to play as before. The heroine smiled kindly at her friend, trying to show with all her appearance that she was fine, so that he too would no longer be sad. After this, Millie asked Noah if he had heard of a separate palace in the middle of the Imperial Palace. The guy asked if this was the same palace where the hostages from Mamak lived, to which the girl agreed. Then the heroine added that in the future, when she gets older, she will work there. At first, these words shocked the guy, so he fell silent, thinking about what he had heard. But as soon as Noah thought it over, he was very happy with what he heard. The young man promised that then he would also go there often to play with his girlfriend every day. But the girl laughed at this, because if he came without permission, they would drive him away. We move back to the present, where the maids were checking the food one more time to make sure everything was in place. While Melina was counting bags and boxes of provisions, she became very tired and even began to yawn. The maid noticed this and asked if everything was okay with the court maid, because it was clear that she had practically no strength. And then Melina began to apologize because, in her opinion, she looks terrible due to the fact that she hasn't been getting enough sleep lately. And then the girls saw a mermaid running towards them with all her might. Cordelia knew that the groceries arrived today, so she came to help the others sort them out. The girl named Thorn replied that they could handle it themselves, so it wasn't worth it. But the mermaid replied that she couldn't just play and do nothing while the others were working. After that, the girl approached the bags and asked if they should be moved to the basement. Melina started telling Cordelia to put the groceries back because the maid couldn't let her do the housework, even though she wanted to help. Then the maid noted that the mermaid was constantly trying to do something to help the others. And the reason for this is because everyone in this place works so hard, and Cordelia feels very lonely, and so she spends time with the others. Without the people around the mermaid, the place in which she lives seems not her home at all. So the girl also wants to be useful to those whom she considers her family. These words reminded the maid of the first time she met Cordelia, who offered to be her friend. Because of these memories and the mermaid's words, Melina began to think about something, and after that the girl turned to the mistress, attracting her attention to herself. As soon as Cordelia looked at the maid, she told the mermaid that she was not changing at all. And after that, the mistress told Melina that she, too, constantly tries to do everything herself and keeps everything to herself. But the maid argued with her, saying that it was her job, and then asked the mermaid if she could then bring the bag inside. And then one of the maids noticed something on the ground and looked at this object in surprise. It was a pearl that fell from nowhere, and then the girl hurried to pick it up. The pearl was almost in the maid's hand. There was very little left to lift it. However, the girl did not have time to take this thing because Melina suddenly grabbed it, scaring the others. When the court maid noticed the fear in the maid's eyes, she began to apologize, trying to calm the girl down. Cordelia didn't understand what had just happened because she saw how nervous Melina was, but didn't know why. So the day passed, and night came, and a bright moon appeared in the sky. The girls wished the lady good night, and she in return wished them sweet dreams, and everyone went to get ready for bed. When everyone left, Cordelia grabbed her shoulder, which hurt her because she had overdone it carrying the boxes. Therefore, the girl decided that it would be better to lie down as soon as possible and rest. And then the mermaid noticed how beautiful the full moon was in the sky, that even outside at night it was light. Cordelia stood and admired how bright the moon was shining, looking at the view from the window. And then the heroine, thanks to the bright light, noticed something that surprised her very much. It turned out that the mermaid saw His Highness, who was standing under her windows. Of course, the girl became interested in what the young man was doing here at this hour. Therefore, Cordelia decided that it was better for her to go down to him to find out everything herself. The castle at that time was dark and empty because everyone had already gone to bed. The lady had already gone down and was going out into the street, looking around in search of the young man. The girl didn't understand where His Highness had gone, so she started calling him. It was very strange, because the young man was standing in this place just a minute ago. And then the heroine remembered that when she met the prince, Melina began to look for her, interrupting the acquaintance. The maid approached the girl, and it was clear that she was not in a good mood. However, Cordelia did not notice the girl's mood, so she calmly greeted her and introduced her new friend. And then, unexpectedly for the mermaid, the maid hit the girl's new friend on the head. And then Melina began to scold the guy because she told him to be careful. And while the friends were arguing, the lady was confused about what was happening. As soon as the girl stopped being angry, she apologized to the mermaid for her behavior, because she shouldn't have behaved like that. This is how Cordelia found out that her new friend and the maid were engaged in fencing together. And then the mermaid asked Melina why she didn't tell her that she knew how to wield a sword, because she would have loved to see it. The girl admitted that she did not talk about it, because she did not consider it something special. And the prince said that Cordelia would definitely like it if she saw Melina in action, because even their teacher always says that she grasps everything on the fly, and even added that the heroine is a real fencing genius. With these words, the guy really confused the girl, who didn't understand why he was saying this. And then Melina said that His Highness is bad in everything except brute strength, and that he always cries before the start of sparring. And then it was the guy's turn to ask why she was telling this. During sparring, the boy is worried that he might accidentally cause harm, so he is afraid to attack. Laughing, Cordelia remarked that the two were very close for His Highness to come all this way to see his friend. And then the mermaid invited Melina to become her friend, taking the girl by the hands, and then added that the three of them could be friends. However, the maid, in turn, snatched her hands from her mistresses. And the reason for such actions was that the girl considered it unreasonable. Then the prince began to persuade Millie into this friendship, and the mermaid thought that since the heroine refused, then she was uncomfortable being around Cordelia. It turns out that it's not that the maid is uncomfortable around her mistress. It's just that the fact that the mermaid lives here as a truce means that Cordelia is quite an important person. This refusal greatly upset the heroine, who wanted to be friends, but her position prevented her from doing so. Melina is just a maid tasked with serving the mistress, so being a friend is an honor that does not correspond to the status of a girl. Remembering this, the mermaid realized that a lot of time had passed since that incident. And then Melina came to the mistress along with the maid, informing her that it was already morning and it was time to get up. In response to this, Cordelia also wished everyone good morning, although she herself was not yet fully awake. The maid noticed that her mistress looked tired, and so she assumed that the mermaid did not get enough sleep. Then the girl explained that the moon was so beautiful yesterday, and that's why she stayed up late at night looking at it. And then the heroine remembered that she had seen His Highness last night, so she asked the others if they had noticed him. This question made the court maid very worried for some unknown reason. Meanwhile, the maid said that perhaps he had some important business at such a late hour, to which Melina replied, laughing, that it was unlikely because it really sounded strange. There are only ladies in this palace, so His Highness would not come here in the middle of the night, so most likely the lady simply mistook the shadow of the tree for His Highness. After listening to the maid's suggestions, Cordelia agreed with her. Therefore, the mermaid left thoughts about His Majesty and said that they should have a good time this day. The girl had a delicious breakfast, and so she sat at the table with a happy smile. After that, Cordelia and the other girls went for a walk, and then the lady was also in a good mood. And so night came, and everyone went to bed so that they could spend the next day just as well. And only the mermaid did not sleep, because she thought that she could not mistake the shadow from the tree for His Highness. There was a full moon last night, so it was too bright to tell the difference between a shadow and a person. On top of that, it was quite funny for Cordelia to watch how Melina tried to get out of it, which means that she was definitely trying to hide something. That's why the girl was on the street at night, because she wanted to find out what they were hiding from her. And the heroine's expectations were justified because she saw a young man who came again, as she had expected. And then she saw Melina running to meet His Majesty. The girl wondered what these two were doing in this place so late at night. It was the maid who denied His Majesty's appearance near the castle at night, and it was she who now came to meet him. While Cordelia was thinking about this, she realized that those she was watching were heading in her direction. The mermaid hid behind the wall and heard Millie saying that the lady most likely saw His Majesty, so he should have been more careful. The young man was frightened, but the maid reassured him by convincing Cordelia that she had simply mistook His Majesty for someone else. But after that, Melina asked the young man to be careful, because the mermaid was certainly not stupid, so she could figure them out. Cordelia heard all this and began to think that the people she trusted were hiding something from her. His Majesty, meanwhile, agreed with the maid's words and decided to be even more careful next time. The heroes were heading in a certain direction, and the girl realized that they were heading towards the greenhouse. And of course, Cordelia followed the couple, not understanding what they needed there at such an hour, and she didn't even remember something like that happening 2 years ago. The girl thought that they could be deceiving her all this time, which means that they are involved in the Emperor's plan. But to the last, the mermaid wanted to believe that Tobias and Melina were on her side, because if they had been deceiving all this time, then she had nowhere else to go, because they were her family. The heroes entered the greenhouse and sat down at the table, and Cordelia continued to watch them. The girl tried to see as much as possible, however. Because of the partitions, it was difficult to see anything. The heroes were discussing something. His Majesty was talking about what should be put where, and Melina was trying to understand what the young man was doing. Tobias tried to explain to the girl how to do things, and she swore at him that this was some kind of nonsense, and His Majesty needed to be explained normally. The maid shouted to the young man that since he agreed to help her, then let him explain normally, and he told her that it was not his fault that she did not want to work harmoniously. The mermaid was very puzzled by this altercation, because she still did not understand what her friends were doing there. Cordelia tried with all her might to understand what was happening there, and at that moment a frog jumped up to her, and then this frog jumped onto the girl's hand, which scared her very much. It was then that the heroes heard a scream and turned towards it to understand what had happened. As a result, the mermaid was found, so they asked her what she was doing here, to which the girl replied that she was just taking a walk. After this, Cordelia asked her friends a counter-question, because they were also in this place for some unknown reason. Then the heroes realized that they had been caught red-handed, so they would have to explain themselves. Friends showed the mermaid a very beautiful bracelet, which the girl really liked. This is how Cordelia found out that they were only hiding a pearl bracelet from her, and not something serious. His Majesty said that Melina did most of it herself, and he was only there to tell her what to do. And then Cordelia noticed that the guy made a wonderful teacher from what she heard. However, the mermaid still did not understand why the heroes did this secretly from her. And then the maid explained that even though the mistress's birthday had already passed, it was supposed that this decoration would be a gift, because the girl's ring had broken, so Melina wanted to please the mistress. Cordelia was finally convinced that she was in vain to suspect her friends of something bad, because everything turned out to be completely wrong. Then Millie apologized to the others, because it was supposed to be a surprise for the mermaid, and she found out in advance, not to mention the fact that it caused a lot of trouble for Tobias. The maid was very upset because she decided that she could not do anything, but Cordelia told her not to think so. The mermaid felt guilty because she did not trust enough those whom she considered her family. Melina's sad thoughts were interrupted by His Majesty, who told the girl that she was again too harsh on herself. After all, the girl tried her best to prepare the gift, so she doesn't need to put herself down like that. Cordelia agreed with Tobias's words, because no matter how it went, the girl was still very grateful, because the maid had prepared a gift because she was thinking about her friend. And such care was very important for the half-breed, so she would gladly accept the gift. With these words, the mermaid managed to embarrass her maid, so that she even stopped saying offensive things to herself. And then Millie remembered how Cordelia had followed her, asking her to become friends. That time, the girl asked the mermaid how many times she had already asked the maid to become her friend, But the mistress replied that she would not leave it just like that. Cordelia did not like the fact that the reason for refusing friendship was that she was an important person. However, Millie was simply worried about what the other servants would think if she became mistress's friend. And then the mermaid asked the girl what she wanted, without thinking about others, because what she wants is much more important than what others think about her. The mistress told the maid that she wanted to know how the girl really felt. Because of these words, Melina remembered how she approached her father with a request to learn fencing. After this, the girl began to argue that this was probably prohibited because it would be unpleasant for people to watch the girl swing the blade. Then the heroine was very worried because it was clear that she really wanted to learn fencing, but was afraid of the opinions of others. And that time the father supported his daughter's desire, saying, "Why not?" The man said the words that what you want is much more important than what others think of you. Cordelia reminded the maid of these words, convincing the girl to think about herself first. The mermaid said that she liked Millie. She liked how kind and honest she was, so she once again invited her to become friends. And this time the girl already agreed, but on the condition that no one would know about it. Remembering this moment, Melina became very emotional, so she stopped worrying about the fact that her surprise was revealed. Therefore, the maid thanked her mistress because she had been told so many pleasant words. And then Cordelia noticed that there was no need to call her madam, because at the moment there was no one else with them, so they could communicate at ease. Suddenly, Millie remembered the letter that she was going to give to the mermaid tomorrow morning, but it was better for the girl to read it now. It turned out that the maid's uncle wrote a short report about what is happening now in the war. Melina's uncle serves in the strategic forces of the Imperial fleet, so he can give a general idea of what is happening, which he did at the request of his niece, which made Cordelia very happy, because perhaps she would learn something useful. From the letter, the heroes learned that although the uncle did not have the right to disclose specific details, he could say that the current situation was much worse than before the truce. Marmaks are completely different from people, and spells make them practically indestructible, and only steel and fire can harm them. And although people try to use these things for greater efficiency, due to their incredible ability to regenerate, they constantly only have to retreat. Despite the difficulties that have arisen, the uncle vows to do everything possible for the good of the Empire and the future of his beloved niece. It turned out that things were going much worse than expected, because mermaids are much stronger than people. Melina paid attention to the vulnerabilities of mermaids, which she did not even suspect, and then asked her friend if she had the same ones. However, Cordelia herself did not know. The prince suggested that this would not work because mixed blood flows in the girl's veins. And although the heroine changes in water, however, she cannot use strength and breathe underwater. But it was not only this information that puzzled the heroes, because there was another paragraph that surprised them. It was not clear what was meant by extraordinary vitality. And then His Majesty admitted that he had heard the commander's conversation with his father, and according to his words, the Marmak's bodies are stronger and more resilient than people. The young man overheard this dialogue inadvertently. However, he definitely heard that when people are wounded in the head or organs, such as the heart, they die, but the mermaids remain alive. And it turns out that Marmaks are immortal, since they cannot be killed in such ways. Although this is not exactly immortality, even with a pierced heart, mermaids are able to move for some time. And if this fact is true, then it is not surprising why the battle is so difficult for humans. These words made Cordelia remember everything that happened to her on her 18th birthday. These memories are so difficult for the girl that she simply grabbed her heart and sat down silently. And her friends, noticing this, tried to understand what was happening to the heroine. Then the mermaid realized that by taking out her heart, they were not trying to kill her at all, but the emperor simply wanted to get her heart. After this, Cordelia asked Melina if she could ask her for a favor. And it all started with the fact that 4 days ago, Millie asked His Majesty to teach her how to make bracelets. The young man agreed to help the girl, saying that she could rely on him. But the young man did not understand why his girlfriend wanted to make a bracelet if the ring was broken, and something could be made to replace it. In response to this, His Majesty saw a gloomy look from his girlfriend. And after that, the girl said that she couldn't believe her own ears, and the young man was probably mocking him. After all, it is the prince who should give such things to the mermaid, and not her. And then she asked her friend how long he was going to continue to cherish one-sided love, and whether he really intended to remain silent about his feelings until the end of his days. It was clear how awkward the guy was to talk about this topic, that he even blushed all over. Meanwhile, the girl continued to scold her friend because he decided to shelve the confession, which made her very angry. Melina believed that since the prince and Cordelia had been in close contact for many years, it was time to try to take the first step and not stand and watch while the other took his beloved away right from under his nose. And no matter how shy the guy was, he understood that his girlfriend was right because he didn't want to remain a stranger to the girl forever. So this time, he needed to gather his courage and confess. The prince even visited the largest jewelry store on the continent to buy a precious stone. The young man told the seller that he was looking for a gem that the young lady would like, and the stone should be the perfect shape to be inlaid into a ring, and it should probably have a bluish tint, reminiscent of the sea. After listening to all the wishes, the man replied that he had an excellent option. After this, the seller ordered his assistant to bring the sample he had brought in the morning. The man at this time told the prince that he would never have thought that His Highness would become interested in jewelry. The young man replied that it was his first time in such a place, and he was somewhat nervous. Then the seller said that His Highness would soon get used to it, just like his father, and then added that the jewel he was going to show was so rare that only the cream of society had seen it, so this stone would be ideal for the prince. The young man noted that he and the seller seemed to have completely different views. The seller also emphasized that their store guarantees complete confidentiality for customers. While the heroes were conducting a dialogue, the assistant nevertheless brought this jewel, which the man grabbed so much. The box contained the latest new product of unparalleled quality, which had just recently arrived at the warehouse. And then the prince learned that it was not a gem at all, but the eye of Marmok. The young man was shocked that he was given the eye of a mermaid, and the man continued to insist that it was amazing beauty. The eye shone beautifully, and this sample arrived this morning, so it is definitely fresh. However, His Highness continued to hope that this was just a joke. The seller, in turn, added that the optic nerve was removed without a single mistake, so the stone is literally perfect. When the young man realized that there really was a real eye in front of him, he felt unwell. The guy explained his reaction to the seller by saying that he had eaten too much for breakfast, although he himself was trying to comprehend the fact that in front of him was Marmok's real eye. And then the young man had to pretend that he was delighted with what he saw. The seller was delighted with the prince's reaction and continued to praise the mermaid's eye, talking about how rare it was. Moreover, only the Imperial family has the right to supply jewelry of this kind. Thus, His Majesty learned that his family owned the right to supply. Crush gains eyes through the Emperor's favor so that the prince learns about the business he will inherit in the future. The High Priest condemned such actions, so they are using illegal means, and recently the supply of jewelry is in full swing. The seller added that it is fortunate that such evil creatures can serve to benefit people, so for business, war is a real blessing. Meanwhile, the mermaid saw that a lot of food had arrived again today, so Cordelia decided to move a few before Melina noticed. However, the bag turned out to be too heavy, so the girl began to fall backwards. The heroine even closed her eyes, expecting to fall, but someone's hands managed to catch her. And Cordelia was saved by His Majesty, who told his friend that she should be more careful. The mermaid was very happy when she saw Noah in front of her, because he helped her a lot. When the heroine was able to get back on her feet, she asked the guy what business he came for today. And then the young man admitted that he had not come on business, but because he wanted to see Cordelia. After these words, the mermaid, with a puzzled look, extended her hand to the young man, stroking his face. And then the girl asked His Majesty what happened, thinking that something bad had happened. The young man clung to the heroine's hand and then admitted that her guesses were correct. While the guy rubbed his cheek against the mermaid's palm, she began to be very embarrassed by this. Then Cordelia asked her friend to tell her everything, and meanwhile she was thinking about why her heart was beating so quickly. As a result, The heroes went to a quiet place where there were no other people, so that the prince could share what was bothering him. Seeing the guy's excitement, Cordelia asked if he was sure that everything was all right with him. Then the hero said that he did not know whether it was true or not, so it was better not to bother his head with empty guesses. The guy understood that he was unlikely to be able to tell everything to the mermaid because it was directly related to her, and besides, the young man believed that it was too cruel to be true. His Majesty suggested that the store owner was using strange gossip and deceiving customers because his father would not hide something so important from the prince. And then the guy asked his friend what she would do if she accidentally found out something that it would have been better not to know at all. The girl admitted that in this case, she would prefer to get to the bottom of the truth. The mermaid admitted that she also has things that you can't tell anyone, for example, that lately she has been doubting herself quite often. Since childhood, Cordelia has been waited on day and night, but she is not sure that she is worthy of this care. And because of the feeling of guilt, the heroine tries to help others as much as she can, but there is nothing in which she would succeed. The heroine is not as good with her hands as Noah, and does not wield a sword like Melina. And this makes Cordelia feel like an old vase that is useless because it is empty. No one knows the future, but if the war ends, then the mermaid's only purpose as a captive will disappear. And then the prince told his friend that she was much more than just a prisoner. The heroine laughed because she hoped to console his Majesty, but in the end, she herself receives consolation. The mermaid admitted that if she finds out something bad, she would prefer to face it face to face, and no matter how painful it would be. The young man noticed that the words Cordelia spoke were very similar to her. Then the prince added that he could not do the same as the heroine, and this is the reason why he likes the mermaid. And the favor that the mermaid asked for that night was that the girl needed an audience with his Majesty, so she asked Melina to send a request. Then the maid asked the mistress what she wanted to talk about. The girl did not confess directly, saying that there was something that needed to be discussed. The next day, the emperor asked his son how long he planned to keep him waiting, since the prince would soon turn 18, and no one asked to take personal part in the war. The emperor explained that he only wanted his son to better understand battle tactics. The prince admitted that he was unlikely to be able to give orders with such skills, so he would rather become a burden at headquarters. The man noted that he does not expect participation from the young man because he only needs to observe and gain experience. But the prince was sure that if he got to the front line, he would do more harm than good. Not to mention, this is a battlefield, so sending an unprepared person just like that could be dangerous. The young man himself will not be able to help, and using the best knights to protect him would be stupid. The emperor noted that his son would in no way respect the principle of using power. These words hit the guy right in the back, because he did not expect such words. The man saw the war as a great opportunity to gain experience in combat, but the prince did not support his views, so his father called him a coward. And then the young man asked the emperor what he thought about this war. The father asked his son why such a question suddenly, because it was unexpected. Then the guy replied that he considered the useless bloodshed, which had been going on for more than a decade, terrible. The young man believed that no one would benefit from constantly killing each other, so it is not clear why this took so long. After this, the prince asked his father if he was hiding something from him. The man replied that only a monster thirsty for blood would enjoy war. But while the mermaids continue to attack their lands and rob their people, it is the emperor's duty to protect his subjects. Even if the goal is only to care for the innocent, it will not be possible to abandon the war. The guy agreed with his father's words, thinking that the emperor could not do something so terrible. And then a maid approached the father and son, who brought the cake, saying that the prince asked her for it. Then the man asked how he should understand it, and the guy replied that he made it himself so that they could enjoy it together while talking. The young man asked the emperor to try this cake, because this time it turned out to be quite good. But instead of enjoying the cake, the man angrily slammed the table. And then the father asked his son how many more times should he repeat that a man should not be in the kitchen. This was not the reaction the prince expected to a cake into which a lot of effort had been invested. The emperor ordered the cake to be taken away, and then added that this was the reason why the crown prince lacked the courage to step onto the battlefield. The man said that today, everyone is getting on his nerves. The Emperor's thoughts were occupied with why Cordelia would ask for a meeting. The girl, meanwhile, was thinking about the information she received last night. She remembered the words that her weakness was due to the fact that she was half human, and for the same reason, she was probably unable to use magic. And then the mermaid decided to check whether she really did not own any magic, because she had never tried to find out. While Cordelia ordered the book to take off into the air and flutter like a butterfly, Melina came into her room, having seen all this. An awkward silence arose between the girls, because the maid saw something she shouldn't have seen. After this, the mermaid immediately rushed to justify herself that it was not what it seemed, even though everything was clear to the girl. Millie wanted to leave so as not to disturb her mistress, however. She stopped her, saying that she wanted to explain everything. The maid shared her thoughts that it was too early for Cordelia to worry about magical powers. And the lady seemed to need to understand how magic works, for example, to read a bunch of spells in order for something to happen. Having tried, the girl began to shout out different phrases, however. Nothing worked. Then Melina explained that magic works a little differently, and not as the heroine imagines. For example, Noah doesn't cast spells when he uses his powers. The mistress agreed with the maid, and then decided that she would ask a friend for help when they met. But Millie replied that this would be of little use. And then the girl suggested to the mermaid that she should ask His Majesty for advice, because he would soon arrive at the castle. Cordelia decided that she would do so because she didn't really have a choice. Although the mermaid seemed to be ready to meet the Emperor, apparently, the fear deep inside had not gone away. Melina said that they were very lucky, because the Emperor had free time in his schedule, and otherwise it would have been very difficult to get an audience in the near future. And then the girls heard some screams that someone had thrown too much wood on the fire. It seems that something happened in the kitchen, so the maid hurried to investigate, and at this time the mermaid will need to prepare to meet His Majesty. Thus, the heroine was left alone with her fears, but she understood that today she would have a chance to talk about everything with the Emperor, so she needed to pull herself together. After some time, shouts were heard from the street that His Majesty, the ruler of the Empire, had arrived. Approaching the castle doors, the man ordered his guards to remain outside. The mermaid immediately hurried to meet the Emperor, telling him that she was looking forward to their meeting. Then His Majesty admitted that he was very surprised by the unexpected request in the audience, and it seemed that this was happening for the first time. In that case, the Emperor will be quite interested to hear what Miss Cordelia has to say. His Majesty confidently said that he was ready to listen to what the heroine wanted to tell him. It was quite easy for the girl to arrange a meeting with the Emperor, but now, when Miss stood in front of His Majesty, her heart began to sink and her hands trembled. Although the Emperor looks young and innocent, there is an insidious snake hiding under this comfortable mask. It was easy for a man to lead a child like Cordelia by the nose for the last 10 years. But the girl could not compete with the Emperor's many years of experience. Finally, the heroine was able to reveal the deceitful nature of His Majesty. It was painful for Cordelia to realize that she had been deceived for such a long time. And even standing face to face with the man, the mermaid did not understand what thoughts he was hiding behind his smile, and this made it even worse. The heroine began her speech by saying that she had a lot of time to think, but in the end she could not calm down her desires, so she asked His Majesty for a meeting. The man was interested in the words that Cordelia had certain desires. The mermaid, meanwhile, was thinking about how creepy His Majesty was. However, she was as angry as she was scared. It must have been funny for the man to watch how the child swallowed all his lies without questioning a single word. Having gathered her strength, the heroine began to say that she was already mature enough to step outside the palace, but the Emperor once again said that now was not quite the right time for this. The girl thanked His Majesty for his concern, but she noted that this situation looked strange, because the truce had been broken, so the girl no longer had a reason to stay in this place. Besides, if Cordelia does not go into the water, then no one will guess that she is Marmac. People in the palace, despite the fact that they know the mermaid's secret, still treat the heroine as part of the family. Then the man replied that this was a serious misconception, because the actions of the servants were not a reflection of their kindness. It is only because these people are properly trained that Cordelia can live in comfort, even though she is a prisoner. Then the mermaid admitted that this was the first time she had heard about something like this. And all because the servants were given an order, so they were forbidden to show any hostility or hatred towards the guest. Speaking of this, His Majesty came closer and closer to the girl. The Emperor said that he hoped that the heroine did not hold any grudge against the servants, so that although Cordelia would not find out the truth, among the people around her there may well be those who despise her. It turned out that the girl knew absolutely nothing about the fact that the servants simply received the appropriate education. The mermaid considered all the servants to be her family, and they only followed certain instructions. And now His Majesty is tormented by curiosity about what the girl is going to do when she leaves the palace. The man asked Cordelia to imagine what life would be like when she came out. After all, even if the mermaid leaves this place, all problems cannot be solved, and the girl does not even know how to distinguish between currencies or read a map. While the Emperor advanced more and more on the heroine, she herself only backed away. His Majesty asked the girl what she hoped to achieve, since she did not even have basic knowledge. Then Cordelia shouted that this was too cruel, because the man was really putting a lot of pressure on her. Here the Emperor could not restrain himself and started shouting, trying to get an answer from the heroine. And after that, the man calmed down again and asked the mermaid what she was really good at, because for someone who is not capable of anything, she allows herself too much. These words hurt the girl very much, because she herself often worried about this. His Majesty believes that without all the care and support given, Cordelia would not have lasted even a day. And the man came closer and closer to the girl, saying that everything he does is done for her good. So the heroine behaves very stupidly, because she is not even able to take care of herself. Due to the fact that the Emperor continued to advance towards the girl, she touched the vase. And so when Cordelia pushed the vase, it broke into small pieces. The girl looked at His Majesty with fear in her eyes, who didn't even bat an eyelid. After this, the man told the heroine that it was very ungrateful of her to do this. The Emperor added that Cordelia was very lucky, but she could not realize it. And then the heroine realized that she didn't even have anything to object to, because the man was absolutely right. At that moment, the mermaid remembered her dialogue with the prince, when she told him that she couldn't do anything. Then the girl wanted to console her friend, but everything turned out quite the opposite. Cordelia thought that she was completely useless, and the man only confirmed her thoughts. And from that moment, the girl's attention was attracted by a piece of glass that lay near her hand. At that moment, the heroine grabbed this fragment, holding it tightly. The mermaid told the Emperor that he was the only one who knew nothing. The girl may not have had a chance to meet the outside world, but there is one thing she is sure of. And as Cordelia said these words, she smiled widely and brought the shard to herself. The Emperor, in complete shock, asked the girl what she had just said. And then the heroine repeated her words that her heart is what His Majesty longs for. What luck that the only thing the girl knew turned out to be the most important for the Emperor. The man did not understand how Cordelia found out about this, because it was his secret. Besides, until now, the mermaid acted as if she knew nothing about it. And there are no those who could tell the heroine about this. And then His Majesty thought that perhaps the mermaid knew everything from the very beginning. Then Cordelia suggested skipping the small talk and getting straight to the point. All this time, the heroine held the fragment to her heart so that the man would agree to negotiate. And if the Emperor does not make contact, he will lose the only thing he desires most. After the meeting, the maid looked at the mermaid's hand in surprise. Melina asked what Cordelia was doing at the audience, because most likely something terrible had happened. And the mermaid replied that she simply accidentally came across a flower vase. But the maid did not believe it, because the girl also had a wound on her chest. Then Cordelia explained that a fragment of the vase simply flew to her when it broke. However, Millie did not believe it. The girl pointed out that the mermaid simply wanted to talk to the Emperor. After this, the maid asked the mistress to tell her everything because she was worried about her friend. But Cordelia once again replied that nothing had happened, which made Melina very angry. The mermaid did not say anything to this because she understood that if she were in the girl's place, she would have reacted the same way. A minute earlier, Cordelia had bumped into Melina as she tried to quietly slip into the room. The mermaid did not want to deceive her friend, so she did not know what to do. While the mistress was thinking about how to quickly escape, she was interrupted by the maid, who began to tell the mermaid that she had been behaving very strangely lately. Millie decided that, most likely, her friend was in big trouble, and she, in turn, tried to convince the girl that everything was wrong. And then the maid said that if the mermaid is not trying to hide anything, then let her tell what exactly happened at the meeting. After all, Cordelia said that the girls were friends, and now she treats Melina as if they were strangers. At that moment, the mermaid noticed how much pain she was doing to her friend, whom she considered her family. Then the lady admitted that she had broken the vase and used the fragments to threaten the emperor with her death. Melina asked her friend why she did this, because it was very dangerous. And then Cordelia explained that she just wanted to leave the mansion, and the emperor continued to refuse. But the girl still didn't understand why she would risk her life for something like this. But the mermaid replied that she was only pretending. And after that, the maid asked the mistress to promise her that she would not do this again. But in the end, Cordelia was able to convince His Majesty, so she will soon go to the battlefield. At the meeting itself, it seemed to the emperor that the girl was serious, even though until that moment it seemed to him that she was an innocent puppy. The man did not show that he was worried, saying that these were all just strange rumors. After this, His Majesty asked the mermaid to lower the fragment first, and then apologized for his rudeness. The man hoped that convincing the child would be as easy as shelling pears, because Cordelia was only 16. However, the heroine said that she would think about it when she left here, so everything turned out to be not so simple. It was not clear to the emperor where the mermaid was rushing, because she had nowhere to go. After this, His Majesty suggested that the girl start by visiting local tourist attractions, and he might even issue a special permit. Cordelia decided that the man was joking if he wanted to let her go so far for the sake of attractions. This took the emperor by surprise, who did not understand what the mermaid wanted. And then the girl remembered the words of the maids, that after the First War, the empire did not have enough resources and people, so now all the young men and many women were being taken to war. Therefore, the heroine told His Majesty that she wanted to go to the front line, because at least she would be of some use there. For a man, these words seemed like ordinary nonsense. But Cordelia knew that women were also conscripted, so she stood her ground. The emperor made it clear that he would not allow this to happen, and then was surprised that of all the possible places, the heroine chose the front. And the mermaid said that this was an ideal place for her, because even someone so useless could be useful there. This desire of the girl did not please His Majesty, because he was worried that she might get hurt. In addition, the heroine could contact the mermaids and return back to the sea, which was not part of the man's plans. And then Cordelia said that she promised to return in 2 years, which already interested His Majesty. And so the emperor asked why the girl should return, since she was so eager to leave the castle. The mermaid explained that this was all because she would turn 18 then. If the heroine does not make it to the ceremony, she will not be considered an adult, so she will have to return anyway. The man decided that since Cordelia wants to return to adulthood, then she does not know about the most important part, which plays into his hands. Then the emperor replied that his heart was relieved that the girl wanted to return, so he promised to consider her request. Outwardly, the mermaid showed her joy, pretending that she completely trusted the man. But inside, the heroine rejoiced, because His Majesty fell into her trap, which is what she wanted. Cordelia understood that the main thing for the emperor was the desire to get her heart in 2 years, but he did not even think that the girl would be able to survive after this. The girl pretended to be grateful, saying that the man had finally realized what it was like for her. All he had to do was pretend that the mermaid had not betrayed the emperor's purpose, and he let his guard down. Cordelia may be weak, but she never wants to accept the death that His Majesty has prepared for her. There was excitement in the castle. All the maids were shouting that they needed to hurry up and finish cleaning. And then one of the maids began to wonder how it took the 3 of them to cope with such a volume of work for so long. But the second maid answered her that there was no point in thinking about such trifles. That's because Cordelia is leaving the mansion soon, so the maids won't have to do all that work anymore. However, the girls were wondering what happened, because the mermaid leaves too early. It seemed to everyone that this day would come much later, because the heroine was only 16 years old. Besides, no one warned the maids about this in advance, so now they have to hurry. But it was still strange for the girls that throughout the entire time the mistress was locked in this place, and suddenly she was allowed to leave. However, in the end, the maids decided that it did not matter because they would finally be able to leave this mansion. The girls worked for 8 whole years, and 2 days later they were fired, so excellent compensation awaits them. One of the maids already imagined that the money she earned would be enough to pay off debts, buy land, and build a house. And the other girls, in turn, said that it was better for the maid not to talk too much for her own good. And then the heroines remembered what happened to them in childhood, when they were punished if they said something unnecessary. Therefore, the maids decided to focus on what was needed right now, because very soon they would be free. The girls, as soon as they leave here, will finally be able to take a look at what has changed during this time. Then the maids will be able to buy themselves a lot of different clothes and delicious food. And then one of the girls said that she was already starting to miss her job. Shvitka, that was the name of this maid, remembered how she first saw Cordelia and got to know her. Meanwhile, the mermaid's friends gathered to say goodbye to her, and No even bought cookies for this. However, the prince was offended by the girl because she told him everything at the last moment, which upset the guy. It seemed surprising to the young man that his father had agreed to this, so he wondered what his girlfriend had done to convince the emperor. And while Cordelia was thinking about the answer, Millie made it clear with one glance that the prince should not know the truth. And then the mermaid said that His Majesty simply could not resist the sobbing lady. However, the guy said that his father was unlikely to be moved by tears, so he didn't believe it. And he also didn't understand why the girl would go to the battlefield, because it was very dangerous. Cordelia asked her friends not to worry about her, because she would be far from the front line, but would simply go to run errands in a field hospital. And on top of everything else, Melina will go with her, so the mermaid will not be alone. It turned out that the prince found out about this only now, because he was very surprised by this news. The young man, in turn, was sure that Millie was going to return to the dukedom, but the girl replied that she could not leave the mermaid alone, because then she would end up in the next world from worries. And then the young man realized that since his girlfriends were leaving, he would be left completely alone in this place. After this, the young man asked Cordelia if she would miss her new home. All the workers will be fired, so the palace will remain completely empty, because it was built specifically for the mermaid. The girl admitted that, of course, she would be sad without the maids, but she could not get the thought out of her head that they were simply so prepared and did not actually treat her well. Therefore now, the mermaid is worried that among the girls, there were those who were disgusted with her, and Cordelia would not even know about it. Then Melina understood why her friend behaved strangely in the presence of others. The girl explained that although the servants had to undergo strange training and remain locked up with the mistress, no one forced them to do so. Although the order was not an easy one, in return they will receive so much money that it will be enough for a lifetime, and even a guaranteed benefit for old age. But even then, no one would risk taking on the job while being forced to live with someone they hated so much. In addition, Melina herself went through this training, and there was nothing like that. After this, the girl added that she would not speak for everyone, but she really liked the mermaid. Here the prince also added his words, saying that he also really liked Cordelia. This encouraged the heroine, who began to smile and thanked her friends for such words. And then the mermaid added that she also loved her 2 friends, making them smile too. Meanwhile, the emperor was pondering how impudently Cordelia had behaved, and then decided that it was not worth giving the girl reasons to act recklessly. His Majesty thought that for now the mermaid could continue to enjoy her success. Although the man would like to simply tie Cordelia's hands and feet, he cannot harm such a precious body. The emperor decided that he would return the mermaid as soon as possible, and until then he ordered the unknown to make sure that she did not do anything stupid. But this was not just a stranger, but Melina, Cordelia's friend, who was like family to the mermaid. The mermaid thought about the past again, remembering the moment when Noah asked her if she was on the side of the mermaids. The girl just didn't understand the question, and the prince explained that even though she was half human, she probably loved mermaids more. Then the young man asked whether the mermaid would want to return back when the war ended. Although Cordelia was too young to understand the meaning of the question, hearing the trembling in her friend's voice, fear pierced her heart. And then the heroine replied that, of course, she would not return back to the sea, because she could not leave Noah alone. At that moment, the girl, without thinking at all, made a promise that she wasn't sure of, but she didn't know what else could be said in such a situation. Born from a biracial bond, Cordelia couldn't even answer the question of who she was. After all, it could have happened that the girl's memories would remain, and in the Azure Sea lived creatures loved by the heroine, just as she now loves No and Melina. In this case, perhaps the mermaid would beg to return to her native abode. The heroine didn't understand who she was and why she didn't remember anything, and she also didn't know what she would do if she was left alone. The girl felt as if there was no support under her feet because she had nowhere to go and nothing to hold on to. Cordelia was wondering whether she was a human or a mermaid, but in the current situation, this was not the best topic for thought. At the moment, the heroine was running to help a man who had suffered due to the war. To save her, the heroine brought water and bandages, doing everything so quickly that others admired her. To all the compliments, the girl only replied that it was her job, and then hurried off to do something else. One of the girls praised Cordelia for making the job much easier thanks to her speed. A week had passed since the mermaid's arrival, and although it was difficult for her at first, she eventually realized that she could do a wonderful job. Even though the work in this place is simple, she is still praised because she tries very hard. So now the girl quickly took everything dirty with her and hurried to the laundry. Meanwhile, others admired how much energy the heroine had. In addition, there were rumors that Cordelia had come from the village, having traveled such a long distance to help. And the girl arrived not alone, but with a girl with blonde hair, so everyone said that her friends were very brave for volunteering. Indeed, Cordelia was helped by her good friend Melina, who decided to support the girl and go with her. The girls talked about how the hot water was running out again, and besides, they would still need firewood for heating. Now the girlfriends are in the castle, which is in the possession of Count Ernest, and this fortress plays an important strategic role. And all because this castle is located near the front line. After the start of the war, the coastal village came under attack, and the damage was colossal, and there were also many wounded and killed. Therefore, the Count accepted Imperial soldiers into his castle and began to actively participate in hostilities. The mermaid thought that since this was the emergency department, it should be outside. But her friend explained to her that since the gates were open, there was no need for that. Millie had also heard that the command headquarters were set up next to the barracks on the front line, and Cordelia replied that they would most likely have a hard time in such a place. Speaking of which, the mermaid was washing her dirty laundry by hand, something she never did while she lived in the castle. The girl noted that the mermaid manages to do this better and better each time, praising her friend. Cordelia was glad that now she could do everything herself and help others, so she was happy that she was in such a place. And then the friend reminded the mermaid that she should not relax, because if someone finds out about her origin, she will be in trouble. But the heroine began to tell Millie not to escalate things, because everyone in this place is so kind that they definitely won't kill her. And then the blonde replied that her friend underestimates human hatred too much, so the mermaid must do everything not to get caught. And then the conversation of the heroines was interrupted by another girl, who also came to them with dirty laundry in her hands. This girl, named Alice Meyer, who was a military nurse, told her friends that they had more linen that needed to be washed. Then Cordelia took all the linen from the nurse, and Alice thanked the girls for their efforts. After this, the mermaid asked the girl what the current situation was on the battlefield, to which the nurse replied that everything was terrible, which could be seen from the wounded who were brought in almost dying. Those who survived were lucky, although they became disabled because the wounds were too severe. And then Alice added that it was all because of the nasty animals, which the girl called damn sea rats. It was then that Cordelia realized that the nurse really hated the marmots, which Alice agreed with. The nurse believed that all mermaids live for is to prevent people from existing peacefully. And while there is an opportunity, it is necessary to exterminate every single Marmok so that not a single monster is born again. And then Alice added that the Emperor treats the war with disdain because he left that girl, meaning Cordelia, alive. The nurse believed that there was no point in worrying about the captive because so much had already happened. In Alice's opinion, it would be better to take the trash to the scaffold and behead him. But the nurse was interrupted by a girl who ran in and said that they needed help with the wounded. And then the friends were left alone again because Alice ran to help the others. Cordelia then thanked Millie for the words she had said earlier, and then said that she would remember them. The heroine realized that people would not accept her because she was of mixed blood. But the girl understood that she should not lose her head because escaping from captivity took a lot of effort. However, the mermaid still did not understand how she could not be afraid of people, because if they found out the truth, they would behead her. The Emperor was right that the anger of the people went beyond the bounds of reason. So it took Cordelia a lot of effort to pull herself together and remember her goal, because she is here to prevent her death in 2 years. First, you need to find out the reason why His Majesty worries the mermaid's heart so much. The girl was lucky that she heard the gossip of the maids, because that's how she learned about the search for volunteers. It was from the maids that Cordelia heard about the support squads, which are located away from the fighting. It was then that the mermaid realized that this was what she needed, because this way, she would learn more about mermaids. And when Melina came in to call her friend to go wash, she in turn told herself that she needed to get ready. So Cordelia had to explain that she was just trying to motivate herself, so she wasn't doing anything weird. And all this because of the words that Nurse Alice said, because she opened the mermaid's eyes. It was then that the girl realized that many would hate her for being a half-breed. After all, for people, Marmoks are monsters and their worst enemies. But her friends supported the mermaid because the girl was not to blame for the war, so there was no point in blaming herself. It turned out that the girl wanted to run away many times, but each time she understood that she did not want to leave Melina and Noah. It is easier for Cordelia to face her fears and go through all the difficulties than to find the strength to leave her friends. Count Ernst Oliver von Robtag, meanwhile, told the general that he could no longer just sit in his castle and watch everything that was happening. The count was worried that the homes and lives of his people were under threat, so he wanted to do something. To this, General of the Imperial Navy, Matthias Louis von Hanover, replied that he understood the count's feelings, but still tried to calm him down. Matthias explained that the army had suffered heavy losses, so it was impossible to act rashly. However, Ernst was not satisfied with the general's inaction, so he blamed it all on idleness. Then Matthias noted that the count often began to allow himself to be rude. In addition, the enemy's tactics are strikingly different from those known from the last war. There are rumors that there has been a change in the enemy commander, and there is a possibility that he is human. Of course, the count was surprised that, according to the information received, they were fighting against a person. Due to the change in approach to combat, which lies in the new commander, attacks cost people much more seriously. So now solutions are being discussed to take some countermeasures. The general assured Count Ernst that soon people would finally be able to fight back against the mermaids. But it turned out that all this was a lie, because the headquarters barely found the motivation to continue fighting. And at this rate, the Imperial army would fall, and the general could not do anything about it. So Ernst would soon realize how dire the situation was now. And then Matthias came across girls, one of whom was Cordelia, and the second told her that she had a beautiful hair color. This confused the general, because people don't have that color of hair. The mermaid admitted to the girl that this is her natural hair color, and it is not dyed. The nurse suggested that the girl was more likely of mixed blood, and then Millie came to her aid, saying that Cordelia's father was from a country in the south. And while the friends scolded the girl for not wearing a bandana, the general thought that this could not happen. Meanwhile, the prince improved his cooking skills, so much so that the head chef praised him. But the guy thought that if he were more capable, he would be close to those with whom he wanted to share his cakes. The guy constantly thought about his girlfriends, and even remembered that Cordelia loved apples most of all. The prince remembered how he asked the mermaid when she would return, which made her think. And then His Highness thought about the day when his girlfriend promised never to leave him. Because of this, the young man became even more upset and even called Cordelia a liar. Lately, a young man has been feeling lonely because his only friends have left him. And then the prince began to think that Cordelia might never return, and he was never able to confess to her. Because the guy was lost in thought, he ran into two girls, one of whom was Schwitka. The prince did not expect to meet the maid who served Cordelia, so he decided to talk to her. It turned out that the girl stayed because she thought that Cordelia would one day return, so she could not leave. Maggie, on the other hand, went to her hometown to help her family. And Lily decided to enjoy life, so she travels around the country. The girls went in search of happiness, and then the maid noticed that the prince also wanted to find it. From the expression on the young man's face, Schwitka noticed that something was saddening him, so she offered to share it with her. Then the young man admitted that he felt abandoned after everyone left to find their own path. And after that, the maid calmed the guy down, saying that he also has his own path. The prince asked which one exactly, and the girl replied that, for example, baking, because he makes it very tasty. And then the young man realized something, and therefore he even jumped up sharply, scaring the maid. The guy thanked Schwitka because thanks to her, he finally understood what he wanted. Friends at the front, meanwhile, noticed that from the place where they were, the ocean was visible, because the Count's lands were surrounded on three sides by water. Although the mermaid had no memories of home, every time she imagined the salty breeze of the ocean, she had a feeling of loneliness. Therefore, Cordelia asked her friend to return without her, and she herself would stay in this place a little longer. And then someone grabbed Melina, asking her how she ended up here. The girl did not understand what was needed from her and who it was, because her face was not visible. As a result, the heroine began to defend herself because this stranger should not have approached her. The man started screaming, and the girl kept trying to escape from his hands. But then the man ordered Melina to calm down, and then it dawned on her that it was her uncle. After that, the heroes decided to step aside and discuss everything, away from prying ears. It turned out that that time the general was surprised not by the color of Cordelia's hair, but by the fact that he saw his niece. The man asked why the girl was here, and she replied that this was an order from His Majesty. And although the general tried to find out more information, Millie could not tell him anything. After this, the heroine complained to her uncle that her brother had never written to her in these 8 years. And then the man suggested that her brother William was simply busy preparing for the inheritance. Melina agreed with this, because the elders could force the guy to go through a lot. The only thing the general could say was that the last time he saw William, he still wanted to meet his sister. And then the man remembered his meeting with his nephew when he was busy writing another letter to his sister. Then the boy admitted to his uncle that he constantly writes to Millie, however, she never answers. Cordelia, left alone, admired her ring against the backdrop of the ocean. The girl decided that if she met the mermaid who gave her this ring, she would definitely ask her about everything. So the mermaid decided to treasure this ring like the apple of her eye, because it is very valuable. And then the heroine heard screams that the enemy had made its way to the castle, so everyone was ordered to take up positions. After this, the order was given to close the gates in order to somehow escape the attack. Then Cordelia hurried to the others and asked Alice what was happening, and it turned out that the mermaids were attacking the village. In the place that was attacked, people fled in all directions, and mermaids climbed ashore. Because the marmots were walking on the ground, people started screaming even more. The mermaids themselves mocked how helpless people were. And then one of the mermaids said that they would definitely avenge their fallen comrades. The news of the attack reached Melina and her uncle, who promised that reinforcements would soon arrive. And then an assistant came running and handed the general a letter, which he began to read. And after reading it, Matthews ordered not to send reinforcements and leave everything as it is. The men began to talk about finding mermaids on land, which surprised Millie, because she didn't know that they could. It turned out that mermaids can turn their tails into human legs and remain in this state for half an hour. The Count heard this dialogue, and after that he said that defenseless people should not be left to their fate. Ernst called the general a coward and a fool because he does not value human lives at all. The general tried to justify himself by saying that this was an order from headquarters, but the Count no longer listened to him. The Count had already sent people on a rescue mission, and the group included several soldiers, a medic, a couple of nurses, and a volunteer as an assistant. Having heard about the assistant, Melina realized that this was not good, because it could be Cordelia. Half an hour ago, the mermaid asked Miss Alice to allow the girl to join them, but the nurse replied that it was too dangerous. But Cordelia was able to persuade the girl, saying that if she was afraid for her life, she would not have come here. After this, the team went to the village of Salts, which was attacked. That same evening, the general approached the Count, asking him about the incident when Winkler was attacked, and then all the inhabitants were evacuated to the fortress. It was not clear to the man why the evacuation was carried out only among the residents of the attacked city, and there were no nearby villages and settlements. The Count explained that this was because the place was already crowded with people arriving from the city, and therefore the evacuation was not carried out for everyone. This is how the general realized that Ernst accepted refugees from Winkler only so that there would be a reason to ignore the rest. And then the Count said that if all the people were hidden, then there would be no one to fish. Half of the profits from Ernst's lands come from fishing, and therefore he did not save all the people. Cordelia, meanwhile, slept and dreamed of little Noah, who was crying because the wounds were too serious and he could not heal everyone. But the girl was woken up because the team was already close to the battlefield, so they had to get off the cart. When the heroine woke up, she forgot her dream, remembering only that there was a child there. One of the soldiers began to give orders to everyone, telling the medics to attend to the wounded, and if anyone met Marmac, they should not let him go alive. Cordelia was scared by what she saw, because many innocent people were killed. Alice, meanwhile, ordered the girl to find a safe place and move the wounded there. The soldiers were already able to find one survivor, and he was crying because he had lost his daughter. When she woke up, the heroine realized that she couldn't waste any more time, so she hurried to the well for water. And then the girl heard some noise from the building and decided that since the mermaids had already left, they might be wounded. Cordelia was already ready to provide first aid, but instead of people, she saw a mermaid. However, there was not only a mermaid, but also a small child who was still alive. The heroine understood that she was powerless, but still ran to the child to save him. The girl remembered a time when she tried to use magic and summon fire. At that time, she decided that she had failed, but then a fire grew in the kitchen. And then Cordelia just wanted to save the child, but the fire suddenly appeared again. This is what helped the girl save the boy and escape with him. Then the soldiers ran there to catch this mermaid, which the heroine pointed out. Then everyone heard the mermaid being killed, so Cordelia began to calm the child down. It turned out that the fire appeared due to a spark that appeared from the stove, in which the coals were still smoldering. But the girl understood that it didn't look at all like the mermaid caught fire by accident. After this, the heroine began work again because she understood that many innocents were suffering from pain at this moment. Alice reported that there were many more victims than just the wounded, and the bodies of the survivors were mutilated beyond recognition. One of the nurses started screaming that she didn't have enough fabric, so Cordelia tore a piece off her dress to help bandage the victim's leg. Then one of the soldiers noticed that the girl who was helping was very collected, calm, and skillful. And then it turned out that not only the fabric, but also the medicines had run out. There were many more victims than those helping them, so it was difficult to know what to do in such a situation. And then her friend appeared next to Cordelia, who rushed to help people. While the girl was in shock, the guy explained that he had to personally visit the Count, so it took some time. And after that, the prince apologized to his girlfriend for being very late.